Last breaths are sacred. When I imagine my final days, I see bubbles. I see the ocean. I see music. Even now, as I seek help to end my life, there is still so much beauty. You just have to be brave enough to see it.
Not sure if you've seen that video. It's an advertisement playing in Canada. That's a Canadian fashion boutique that is, well, there's no way to put it, glamorizing suicide, euthanasia. Maybe you've seen it on your social media, on your Facebook page. Honestly, it's disturbing from my point of view, and it's something that we should be on the lookout for here in America, because the debate over assisted suicide and euthanasia is already engaged at the state level, and it continues to march on. Chris Schandevel is senior counsel at Alliance Defending Freedom, and he joins us now. Hey, Chris, thank you.
Hi, Larry. Thanks for having me on.
This is a major issue right now. I know that there are certain states that already have provisions for assisted suicide. So first of all, lay that out. What legally now is the status of euthanasia in America?
Sure, it is a major issue here in the United States, and what we're seeing happen in Canada right now is really a cautionary tale for us and for the states that already have legalized assisted suicide here in this country and the states who are considering doing that. So we currently have 10 states total in the U.S. that have legalized assisted suicide, plus the District of Columbia, and we have other states that are considering passing laws to do the same. We also have active litigation in certain states. For example, in Massachusetts, there's been a lawsuit filed by advocates for assisted suicide, arguing that there's a state constitutional right to assisted suicide. That's a lawsuit that ADF has been involved in. I actually had the opportunity to argue that case back in March. So it is an issue that's very live right now in the U.S.
Now, this ad in Canada focuses on this woman. We just saw her birth date and the date of her death. Her name is Jennifer Hatch. She died at 37 years old at her own hand, and she was suffering from something called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Are there any provisions right now in the states that you laid out with regard to assisted suicide that preclude somebody from killing themselves? Let's say if they're just feeling depressed, if they're suffering from, I mean, do they have to be suffering from a life-threatening illness to trigger this kind of drastic choice?
So what we've seen so far in the states here in the U.S. is that they have tended to put in place a requirement that the person be terminally ill. Now, a terminally ill diagnosis is very hard to make. Doctors are not very good, studies have found, at determining how long someone has to live. But what Canada is teaching us, that these so-called safeguards that are supposed to be put in place to protect people, they don't work and they don't last. So we've seen Canada, for example, take away the limitation for terminally ill people to allow assisted suicide to anyone, even with a mental illness. That's the newest change that they've made. And we fear that states in the U.S. are going to follow suit and continually liberalize their physician-assisted suicide laws.
Wait. Hold on. Did you just say that Canada has now made it legal for somebody suffering from mental illness to kill themselves? I mean, I would think that would be the one item that you would want to put the most safeguards around.
You would think so. And unfortunately, what we've seen playing out in Canada and across the states is that once you make it legal for anyone to kill themselves and to get medical assistance in killing themselves, then there becomes an argument that, well, if you give that right, whether it's by statute or by constitution, to some groups of people, you have to give it to everyone or else you're discriminating. And that's where this slippery slope really takes off.
I hate using the term devil's advocate in this context because I think it's quite apt, actually. But I'll add, your group is called Alliance Defending Freedom. I mean, is there anything more fundamental about the freedom to choose whether one lives or dies? Explain away why this shouldn't be something that a person, an individual, an American who loves their freedom and liberty, if they choose they don't want to live anymore, then why shouldn't they be able to kill themselves, Chris?
So the problem is what we're seeing is that once you legalize a doctor's involvement and a patient killing himself or herself, there are no way to place adequate safeguards on that process. And so what we have is not people who are making the free, informed decision to kill themselves. People are being pressured. Hospitals are bringing it up and prompting people to think about making that decision. There are like cost analyses that so-called medical ethicists are making patients think about, the burden that they're going to be on their family members. So it's not a matter of people making this decision freely of their own will. And above and beyond that, the effect that this has on the medical profession, it fundamentally transforms doctors, nurses, et cetera, from people who are healers, from people who are supposed to be about doing no harm, to being a profession of killing, of facilitating the deaths of their patients. And what it does is it drives people out of the medical profession who value life, who value their oath to do no harm. So if you're someone who wants to be able to freely choose a medical provider who values your life and the lives of your family members, your parents, your grandparents, states like California are driving doctors like that out of the profession because they're not honoring even sincere religious-based conscious objections to participating in the death of another human being.
Well, and when you put it that way, it obviously makes sense that you want to try to have a firewall there between the medical profession, which is meant to heal and keep people alive, versus this choice where people are ending their lives. But when you look at Canada, Chris, they've got, famously, a nationalized healthcare system. It's the government. This isn't just a doctor deciding this. Those doctors are paid by the government because the government runs the healthcare system. So now you've got the government being in charge of these life or death choices. And certainly there are people advocating for that here in America. That's kind of a chilling effect, isn't it? When you realize the government is now involved in life or death decisions about somebody's suicide.
Absolutely. That's absolutely correct. I think what we're seeing in Canada is that once you have a government-run healthcare system, you really see the government seeing patients as price tags. And then once you throw legalized assisted suicide into the mix, you also see the government and even hospitals viewing patients' lives through this cost benefits analysis. And it leads to the horrible results that we're seeing in Canada and that we're already beginning to see here in the U.S.
Is there an age limit right now on this? What age can one decide for themselves that they want to end their life?
Sure. So there has been an age limit in Canada, but just like I said about the fact that these so-called safeguards don't last, one of the changes Canada made recently is that they're now allowing so-called mature minors under the age of 18 to make the decision to kill themselves with the assistance of their doctors. And there are even some advocates, there's a college in Quebec that is arguing the law should be further liberalized to allow newborn babies up to the age of 1 year old with certain medical conditions to be euthanized. So it's just a horrifying slippery slope that Canada's on and that some states seem to be setting themselves on here in the U.S.
And finally, we talk about people getting a terminal diagnosis from a doctor. I can't imagine, but you're told by your doctor you're going to die. But if there is a way for that process to unfold in a way that you will not feel pain and you'll be comfortable until your last dying breath, I think that would be everybody's dream come true. Is the pain factor part of this law? If a doctor can't keep you comfortable in your dying weeks or months, then is that something that would then say, okay, listen, if I'm going to feel pain and I'm going to suffer, at least let me end my life?
So we have seen amazing advances and breakthroughs in palliative care and pain management care in recent years. And so we just fundamentally believe that every life is worth living and that life should be lived with dignity up until the point of natural death. And palliative care, pain management are two ways of doing that. But when you have a system that legalizes a quote unquote easy way out, the focus of the doctors, the physicians, the government turns to that quick escape instead of focusing on caring, loving, supporting these patients up until that point of natural death.
Yeah, and fundamentally, this shouldn't really be a medical decision. Ending one's life, that's an ethical decision, a moral decision, a faith-based decision. Certainly shouldn't be glamorized by a fashion company in a television ad. And I don't know, it seems to me, Chris, that for our entire history of mankind, there has been a way for people to end their life if they so choose. I don't think they need to get a doctor involved, but that's just me talking. Thank you for joining us for a very important conversation from Alliance Defending Freedom. More to come on O'Connor Tonight.